All right, we are going to start on Unit 7, Lesson 1, which is right triangles. We're on trigonometry, and we're going to first look at special triangles. So as you learned previously, there are two different types of special right triangles. That would be a 30, 60, 90, which you can see here, and a 45, 45, 90 triangle. Now, there are certain equations that we're going to use to find and help us find all the sides of both of these special triangles. So let's go down. All right, here we go. Now, special right triangles, there's two different equations to help us find these different triangles. So in a 45, 45, 90 triangle, that is what we call an isosceles triangle. And the reason why is because if you have a 45, 45, 90 triangle, that means that both of your angles are congruent, which means both of your sides are congruent. So we actually have an isosceles triangle. Now, if you look here, the formula is to find the sides is a, and a square root 2. So that means that obviously both sides are congruent because it is an isosceles triangle, and the hypotenuse, which is opposite of your right triangle, that side is going to be a square root of 2. Now if we go down to 30, 60, 90 triangle, again, it's 90, and then we've got 60 and 30. So over here in this triangle, we do not have an isosceles triangle. So we have three different sides. Now, the side that is opposite your smallest side, which is 30 degrees, is going to be just A by itself. And then the next smallest angle is 60 degrees. So the side opposite of 60 degrees is going to be A square root of 3. And then the biggest side is going to be your hypotenuse, which is opposite of your 90-degree angle, and that's going to be 2 times A. So you're basically going to multiply your one of your legs by 2, and it would be the leg that is opposite of your 30 degrees. Okay? So let's go down to actual examples. Now, we're going to do example 1, 2, and 3 together. So let's go ahead and get to that work. So in example 1, we see it asks us, a right isosceles triangle has a leg that is 3 inches. Find the other 2 missing sides. So let's go to our work. Now remember, an isosceles triangle means that there are 2 sides that are congruent, okay? So we've got 45, 45, 90. And then it tells us, if we go back, it tells us that our side or our leg is 3 inches. So one of our sides is 3 inches, which means the other side has to be 3 inches because both of these sides are congruent. And remember the formula for your hypotenuse. Your hypotenuse for a 45, 45 over here, 45, 45, 90 triangle, your hypotenuse is a square root of 2. So if we know what a is 3, then our hypotenuse is going to be 3 square root of 2. All you're going to do is just fill in basically that formula, okay? So now let's go ahead and go to example 2. Example 2 says a square has a diagonal that is 10 feet. So find the sides of the square. Now, you need to know a little bit about squares. So went ahead and drew a square right here, okay? Now in this square, as you're going to see, it says the diagonal. First off, a square has all congruent sides. So all of the sides in a square are congruent. Second thing in a square is that their angles are all right angles, okay? So I went ahead and drew those in for you. Now it says our diagonal is 10. So when you draw a diagonal in a square, it actually it bisects the square, so it actually cuts these two angles into half. So I went ahead and I labeled my, my diagonals 10. I now actually have half of 90 is 45 degrees, so I have a 45, 45, 90 triangle. It's an isosceles triangle, and both of the sides are congruent. Okay, so I need to find out what is A. Well, I do know if we go back up here to my 45, 45, 90 triangle, I know that my hypotenuse is a square root of 2. So I'm just going to make my diagonal, which is my hypotenuse, equal to a square root of 2. which is what I did down here. 10 is equal to a square root of 2. Then to get a by itself, I'm just going to go ahead and divide by a negative 2. Okay? So I get rid of my square root of 2. Then I have what I do to one side, I have to do to the other. So I have 10 square root of 2. Now, you can never have a square root on the bottom. So we actually have to get rid of this square root here on the bottom. How do I do that? Well, I actually just multiply by the square root of 2 on top and bottom. So I'm going to take 10 square root of 2 and I'm going to multiply that by the square root of 2 over the square root of 2. Now, when I multiply two square roots together, it actually gets rid of the square root and I just have 2 by itself. So I get 10 times the square root of 2 divided by 2 because when I multiplied them together, I got rid of my squares, and that gives me a. And remember that this is an isosceles triangle, so if one side is 10 square root of 2 over 2, so is the other side. Okay? All right. Just get set up here. Okay, we're going to go ahead and skip example 3, and we're actually going to go ahead and skip example 4, and we're just going to go straight down to example 5. So example 5 says, find the altitude of an equilateral triangle if the sides are 6 centimeters. So we went ahead and set that up. So it says in our example that it is an equilateral triangle, okay? And the sides are 6 centimeters. 6 centimeters. So let's go ahead and set up our equilateral triangle. Remember that our equilateral triangle is all sides are congruent. So I went ahead and I set up my triangle and I made all the sides congruent. And that's what these little slash marks mean. And it wants us to find our altitude. So in an equilateral triangle, all three of our angles have to equal to 60 degrees because 60 times 3 is 180. So I went ahead and I just labeled my angles. Now remember, here's my altitude. It goes from top to bottom, okay, and it makes a right angle. And my altitude is my height. Now remember when I put this altitude here, it actually cuts this angle into half. So I now have 60 divided by 2, which is 30. So I actually have a 30, 60, 90 triangle. So I went ahead and I redrew it down here. So if you can remember, so we've got a 30, 60, and 90 triangle. Now, it told us that all of our sides were equal to 6, okay? So if we go back, it tells us that our sides are 6. So I went ahead and I labeled all of my sides to 6 degrees. But if I cut this triangle in half, then that means that I also cut this base in half. So 6 divided by 2 is 3. So the base is 3, and my hypotenuse is 6. Now if we go back up to our formula, a 30, 60, 90 triangle, the side opposite the smallest angle is A. The side opposite my 60-degree angle is A square root of 3. And then the side opposite of my right triangle, or my right angle, is 2A. So let's go back, and so opposite of my 30 degrees is 3. And then opposite of my 90 degrees, remember, my hypotenuse was 2A, and 3 was A. So 2 times 3 is 6, so we're good so far. And then the side opposite of 60-degree angle is A square root of 3. Well, if my A is 3, then the side opposite of my 60 degrees has to be 3 square root of 3, and that's my height. Now let's go ahead and look at example 6. It's very similar. So example 6 says, find the sides of the equilateral triangle if the sides are 10 inches. So we're going to first draw an equilateral triangle. Remember, equilateral means that all the sides and angles are congruent. So I went ahead and I drew my equilateral triangle. And I made all of my sides equal to 10. And then I went ahead and made all my angles equal to 60 degrees. And again, it wants us to find the height. So I drew my height, which is just going from one angle all the way down to the base and forming a right angle. And then I went ahead and I just separated my triangle out. So remember that the height cuts this angle into half. So I actually have a 60, 30, 90 triangle. So 60, 30, 90. And also remember that this, the height actually separates our base into two. So 10 divided by 2 is 5. So my base is 5, and the side opposite of my hypotenuse is 10. Okay, so remember that the angle that's opposite of 30 is A, and the angle opposite of my 90 degrees is 2A. So 5 times 2 is 10. Okay, and then the angle opposite of 60 is A square root of 3. Well, my A is 5, so my height is 5 square root of 3. And that is the answer for my height. Okay, and last we're just going to look at example number 7. So let's go back up and look at example 7. It says the road sign is shaped like an equilateral triangle. Estimate the area of the sign by finding the area of the equilateral triangle. So I went ahead, so go ahead and actually do example number 7 on your own.